Shemai, and welcome to my wild Welsh garden. Well, we're halfway through October and it's suddenly turned really cold here. So I thought this would be a good time to take you on a tour of the October garden, because I don't know what the weather's going to be like, but as it gets colder, I'm less likely to want to come outside. So this is where I feed my birds. So I've got two feeders up there. There's peanuts on the left and mixed seeds on the right. And then round to the right, I have a bird table, which came from the RSPB, and there are mealworms on the left and fat balls on the right. And as you can see, everything is empty. Now it's lunchtime and they were all full yesterday morning. So I really only feed the birds every other day. So they spend the first day sort of clearing out the feeders and chucking everything all over the place, and then the next day they clear up. The feeders are squirrel proof, but they also keep out the jackdaws and the starlings. I do feed the starlings. I put food on the bird table for them. I put food on the lawn and also on the path and on the steps here. This is where I feed the ground feeding birds, so I can see them from my kitchen. I put sultanas out for the blackbirds, and I put mealworms out for the insect-eating birds like the robin and the dunnocks and the wagtails, although the starlings do eat most of the mealworms and the sultanas, to be honest. And there they are in that big old ash tree, which actually isn't in my garden, it's outside, and is suffering to some extent from ash dieback, but seems to keep going. And oh, there they go. And then down there is my hedgehog cafe, where I feed the hedgehog every night, although at the moment I don't think he's probably hibernating yet, but he certainly, I don't see him at the moment, he's certainly staying near his home. Now in the winter I try and put sort of winter pots here, so winter flowering shrubs like that one that has little white flowers that I can't remember the name of. And then on this side there is a sweet box, and I put that there because of the scent really. The flowers are not much to look at, but it does smell lovely. And I usually have pots of bulbs here, but I actually haven't got round to planting up my bulb pots this year, so maybe that might get forgotten for this year. Little bit of autumn colour there from the sedum and the smoke bush. I planted that smoke bush maybe 3 years ago, and it's very slow growing, but it seems quite happy there. And then round here are shrubs which were here when I came. There's a few azaleas, one hiding behind that prostrate rosemary there, which is obviously trying to take over the world. And then there's another azalea and another azalea and another azalea. And that tree is a Magnolia stellata, which must be very, very old. And then on the other side of the path leading up to the stone shed, there are two pierisses. I never quite know whether to say pierisses or pieri, but anyway, there's two of them. One's pink and one's white, and they serve two purposes really. They have lovely, lovely flowers in early spring, which are great for the early bees, and also they provide cover for the birds on the way to the bird table. And just to the right of that is a conifer, which I'm afraid I've scalped a little bit. It was just a green blob and wasn't doing anybody any favours. So I've had a little go at maybe starting to cloud prune it, but we'll see. So now I'm at the top of the steps, just looking at the flower beds on the left. Now when I came, this area was all grass, just scratty grass all the way up to the greenhouse, and I made these raised beds. There's all sorts of everything. I couldn't possibly go through everything that there is, but everything has been planted either for, to be honest, winter interest, because I spend such a lot of time looking at this part of the garden from my kitchen, or with flowers that will be good for the bees. And now I'm a little bit higher up the garden, just looking back at the same area. There's a couple of roses in there. There's a pink willow, which was an impulse buy, because it just looked so pretty, and it does have lovely pink willow, pussy willows in the spring, which the bees do seem to like. There's a native silver birch there that's got a bit mixed up with some sunflowers, and just to the left of it there's a wigwam with runner beans growing up. There's a lot of beans left. I'm just going to leave those and the sunflowers because the birds eat them in the winter. There's two main climbers climbing up the trellis. Rambling Rosie, which you can see is flowering still, or again, and a honeysuckle which is red and white. It's a sort of shrubby honeysuckle more than a twining honeysuckle, but it does make a nice bush for the birds to hide in. And there's also a Gertrude Jekyll rose, which has gone over now. There's no flowers of that left. And then we're going to go through an arch. Now that's got quite a lot of stuff, as you can see. There's a clematis and two roses. You can see there's a few little flowers still on the one on the right, and the one on the left has these lovely big orange rose hips. And if I could remember what they were, I'd tell you, but I can't. I've forgotten, as usual. We go through the arch, and if we turn to the left, this is what I call the breakfast run, because it gets the sun in the morning and I can come in here and have my breakfast. And at the moment it's a bit of a nursery. It's got the seed trays and the little seedlings in here. Now the floor is wood chip. It's been self-seeded by all sorts of things, including a bramble. But all this is coming up this winter, and I'm going to replace it with slate. And some lovely calendula still flowering. There are insects around in the garden today. You can just see one on that flower. Just one little fly. There's a big white camellia over there, which was here when I came. And the sparrows love to hide in it. And then next to that there's a rose and a large hydrangea. Now I don't think hydrangeas are very good for wildlife, but what I do find is that the bees and the butterflies like to sit on the flowers and sort of bask in the sunshine. And then down the side of the greenhouse here there's all sorts of stuff, but there's a nice buddleia. I've got several buddleias in the garden, most of which have been left to grow as trees really this year, but this one I do deadhead and keep small, and this is where I sit and watch the butterflies in the summer. And then behind the greenhouse there's a climbing hydrangea climbing up my neighbour's workshop. And then there's an enormous buddleia, which as you can see I haven't deadheaded because basically I can't reach. And that's white. So I'm going to keep that as a tree to attract the butterflies. And then behind that over there's some autumn raspberries. And then this is my greenhouse, which was here when I came. It's actually looking quite pretty in here at the moment, with this self-seeded calendula and Californian poppies and chamomile. There's 2 pots of trailing pelargoniums, that's what they are. And then over there's some New Zealand spinach, which was also self-seeded from the previous year. And then various things that go out in the summer, come in the winter. Rosemary that seeded itself over there. Just some pretty things. And then on this side, there's some Ioniums. Not very good for wildlife, but I have them just because I like them. I grow early salads in here in the spring, and then I follow that with tomatoes. But I'm afraid this year was just a dismal failure, because everything fried in that really hot May and June that we had. On the other side of the greenhouse there are raspberries. There's a row of autumn raspberries and then a row of summer raspberries, and in front of that is some rhubarb, which has virtually disappeared now, but you can see all the raspberry suckers that are coming up. Along the back of the garden is my native hedge. I call it my security hedge because so much of it has got prickles. There's a dog rose, which is incredibly prickly. There's blackthorn, which doesn't have prickles, it has enormous spines. And then there's hawthorn, which is very prickly. And then in addition to that, there's bird cherry and there's Guelder rose. And this has been in for 4 years. No, 5 years this winter. And they came in a bundle of hedging plants, and they were about 9 inches, 6-9 inches tall. Tiny little twiggy things they were. And what I'm doing here, apart from that yellow thing which was here when I came, and I've kept that because it's quite pretty really. And in addition to that, there's also some honeysuckle which was here already, and a clematis which I planted, and then this Virginia creeper. You can just see the red leaves of the last of the red leaves, and that sort of twines in and out of everything. It's looking a bit thin at the moment because it has lost quite a lot of its leaves. But what I'm going to do with this is grow some of them into trees. So I'm going to have 1 hawthorn tree, 1 blackthorn tree, 1 bird cherry tree and 1 Guelder rose tree along here, and keep everything else short. And then in the middle there is actually a quince tree. I've harvested some of the quinces, and I've left some on the ground for the wildlife. Now, traditionally, this is the time for cutting hedges back, for trimming them, making them all tidy for the winter, and then you burn all the prunings in a bonfire. But of course, if you do that, you lose 2 things. You lose the fruits that the shrubs have been making all summer, and you lose really valuable hiding places and perching places for birds and habitats for insects to overwinter. So I'm not going to touch this now until next spring. And then as we turn back towards the house, this is a big bed that has all sorts of different herbaceous plants in, and a few little shrubby things, and the wildlife pond. And I think where I've perhaps been going wrong with this pond is I've been, as usual, too tidy. I've been sort of keeping the pond plants in check and taking out the blanket weed and the duckweed, and I think I've been losing wildlife by doing that, even though I've been putting the sort of the prunings and the stuff I've taken out on the side of the pond. I think that's where I've lost wildlife. So this year I haven't taken out anything. So we will see. Yet again, we will see what happens. I might be sorry next year and have a pond that's totally choked up. But on the other hand, I might find I suddenly get all the wildlife that I've been missing here. And here is this really old ornamental cherry tree which was here when I came, but it was in a very sorry state. It had lots of dead branches and diseased branches, so I pruned it right down. Well, when I say I got a bloke to do it. Pruned it right down, and it's grown back again, and this year all the branches flowered. It's obviously not in a good state because you can see that branch on the right has got a great crack in it, so I don't know how long it will last, but as long as it lasts until all my other trees have grown up a bit more, I shall be happy. And then behind the cherry tree, at the back of the shed, there's another buddleia, which again I've allowed to grow tall, but it hasn't formed into a tree, it's just stayed multi-stemmed and sort of flopped over. So I haven't quite decided what to do with that, but I think I might cut it all down in the spring and let it grow up again. And then turning back towards the house, you can see another perspective of the garden. See the arch that we've come through. The breakfast room is in front of the greenhouse there on the right, and then on the left are the vegetable patches that always were vegetable patches. The people that lived here for many years before I moved here were both gardeners, and this was where they grew their vegetables. Now this large bed on the left is the little orchard or the food forest. There are 3 small fruit trees here, 2 apple trees and 1 pear tree. Now they went in several years ago. The first year they were just a straight whip, and I cut them off about 3 foot from the ground. The next year they grew their branches, and then I pruned those branches back to 3 or 4 and took them off to 2/3 of the length. And then this year they've grown more branches. So my understanding is, and I'm not a fruit pruner at all, is that I leave them now. They've had what they call their formative pruning, and they can be left now to just grow into trees. Now, in addition to that, there are also some fruit bushes. There are 2 gooseberries, a green one and a red one, and there are 3 different currants, a black one, a red one and a white one. And then there's all sorts of different herbs and flowers and weeds underneath. This thing here right in front is an angelica, which has been in a couple of years, but the slug's at the growing point, so I don't know if I'll ever get flowers from it, but I'll leave it there and see what happens. And then this is what happens if you grow brassicas in a wildlife garden, is that they get eaten. So I put this arch in myself. I watched the guy put the other arch in, and I thought, well, I can do that. So I put that one in myself. That side has got a rose, it's supposed to be a climbing rose, but it really has been very slow to climb. And in addition, there is this sort of perennial nasturtium, and again I'm really sorry but I can't think what it's called, but it forms little tubers that have a sort of nutty flavour. You can roast them and eat them and keep some of them for next year, a bit like kind of artichokes, the way you deal with Jerusalem artichokes. So that's what I'll do. In November I'll dig that up, harvest the tubers, eat some of them and keep the rest for next year. And then on this side there is a lovely clematis and a golden hop, where you can see that something's been having a good old munch of the hop. I'd like to think it was caterpillars, but I have a sneaking suspicion it was slugs. And then there's a path in between the vegetable patches, which again you can see has been taken over by self-seeded forget-me-nots. But this is going to be replaced as well, so I've been digging some of them up to give to a friend. Came for coffee this morning. And then next door is another vegetable patch, which as you can see is filled with an awful lot of things that aren't vegetables. But there have been vegetables in here. I've had, what have I had? I've had onions and courgettes and peas and sweet corn and more peas from here. And I've sown the empty spaces with a green manure, and I've just left the rest. Now, I was always taught and have always practiced that at the end of the season you clean up your vegetable patches, and in the olden days we were taught to dig them over to a spade's depth so the frost could get at it and kill the pests. Well, I think that's been pretty well proved now that that's not a good idea, because you destroy the structure of the soil, you destroy the mycorrhizal fungal systems that are so beneficial, and if you leave it exposed to the elements like that, then in the winter the rain leaches all the goodness away. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to leave this just as it is, and I shall prepare it for vegetables next spring. And then facing the vegetable plots I've got my lovely shed, which is my potting shed, and this was here when I came. It's made out of old railway sleepers, which I'm pretty sure were pinched from one of the lines going up to the mines. Most things were pinched from the mines around here, to be quite honest. And then that's my boundary wall with my next door neighbours, which is covered with this amazing Boston ivy, which is just turning. It turns the most fantastic red colour. And a wisteria, and they're both coming in from next door. And here I've come to the edge of the vegetable plot that's full of things that aren't vegetables, including this mass of nasturtiums. And then on the left here there's another row of autumn raspberries. Now they only went in this year, so I wasn't expecting very much from them, but next year I'm hoping to get a good harvest. And I put this little arch here because I was hoping to grow pumpkins up, but it was a pretty much of a failure. But I don't know how much of that was just the wrong place and how much of that was the weather conditions, because we had a very, very cold and very wet July and August. There's a plum tree here which I got from the same place as the apples and the pear, so that's a Welsh variety. I haven't actually had any plums off it yet, but my experience with plum trees is you can go for years with nothing and then suddenly have tons and tons and tons. And then on the right here there is my Brassica bed, which as you can see I've covered with butterfly netting, and the brassicas in there look really amazing. there is the most enormous Dorbenton kale. I don't know whether you can see it's trying to get out through the roof. And then these are perennial cabbages, and those darker ones over there are 9-star perennial broccoli. And this amazing thing is a self-seeded, self-sown achocha. I tried achochas one year and they were absolutely horrible. So I won't grow those again. So I've come down the side of the Brassica bed to the way back onto the lawn. I'm going to film it this way because the other way I'm filming into the sun. That's the just the edge of the Brassica cage and the plum tree. And on the right here there's a huge dog rose which I've just let grow as tall and as untidy as it wants to be, but you can see it's covered in rose hips. And then in front of that is a blackthorn, and then on this side there's a hawthorn and a Guelder rose, which were actually left over from the hedge at the back, but I thought I'd put them in here and let them grow into trees. And I do have a plan of kind of training the hawthorn and the blackthorn to meet and form an arch, but we'll see whether that's going to be possible. On this side of the lawn is a variegated holly, and then there's a red camellia. Now these were both here when I came, and I've kept, they have grown bigger in 5 years, but I do prune them back a bit in the winter because I take bits of greenery in as a Christmas decoration. And they're both good for the birds to hide in. The sparrows love to go in there and argue with each other. And the holly also has little flowers, little white flowers. In fact, there are some little white flowers there. There's one, which the bees love, and then they turn into these berries, which the birds love. So, quite good for wildlife, really. And then next to it, just to fill in that gap in the kind of hedge, really, I've planted a flowering currant, so that has lovely pinky red flowers early in spring and is great for the early bees. And next to it is a pieris, which was here when I came. And then there's another trellis. So I actually put this trellis up because I watched the guy put the other one up, rather like the arch. I thought, well, I could do that. So I put that one up, and it's got, oh goodness knows, 2 roses, 2 clematis, 2 different honeysuckles, and another creeper that I want to grow up that pipe there that was part of a washing line when I came. I think it's a prop from the mine, kept the roof up. And then in front of the trellis there's two places for the birds to drink and to bathe. And here we are back down to the house. That is a rowan tree. It's not a native one. I think it has yellow berries, but it is supposed to be very good for wildlife. It's actually the 3rd tree I've planted there. I've had 2 crab apples which have just not done anything, so I thought I'd try something completely different, and I've put in this rowan tree. And this area here just has a selection of different plants. That's the peony that's going to go, and down there is the stinging nettle that I'm going to plant in its place in a pot. And then if you've been watching my previous videos, This is the area that I'm going to turn into an area of long grass for the invertebrates and the insects. And then this is the flowering ivy, which is so good for insects. There's not so many there now because it's so cold today, but in the last few weeks it's just been buzzing with insect activity. And then this is a big hawthorn which I planted a few years ago, although I did plant it as quite a big tree. And that's not a native one either, that's got pink flowers. And then we head on down the path to the stone shed, and there's a little ramp here for the hedgehog to use to get up the step, but in fact he doesn't need it, he can climb the step quite happily. And then we go through a metal arch here, which again came from the mine. I'm not quite sure what the metal was doing in the mine, and I don't think it was arch shaped, I think it was straight and I bent it. My next door neighbour gave it to me, he used to work there. And then we go through there into the polytunnel, and there's a clematis that grows up on the right side and a honeysuckle on the left. And then this side, you can just see the honeysuckle there and the arch on the left. There's this fabulous big buddleia, which is a lovely sort of lilac colour and has really very nicely and neatly grown into a multi-stemmed tree. So I'm going to leave that as it is, because the flowers are high up, so the butterflies can home in on it. So we've been right round the garden now, coming back down the slope to the bird table. And my collection of terracotta pots. And if I just turn. So I hope you've enjoyed the October tour of my wild Welsh garden. Well, thanks for watching the video. If you made it to the end, well done. I do hope you'll come again. If you'd like to come again, then please subscribe and like the video. And I'll see you next time. Bye! Hwyl am y tro!